Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another wonderful tasting with the Virtual Tasting Society. Today, we're excited to feature Proof and Wood. Dave Schmier is the founder of Proof and Wood, and they are here with amazing awards and 7 awesome expressions for us to try. Dave is here to give us the latest and greatest. We were lucky enough to have him join us a couple of years ago to tell us about the brand, but I'm sure we'll get a refresher today. And today we're trying 7 expressions. So we got 3 bourbon, 3 rye, and then 1 blend, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Dave?
I'm taking a look at what we got. Let's see. That sounds about right.
All right. Super excited to dive into these. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know you're traveling and going to all these whiskey festivals, so you're a busy man. So we appreciate you taking the time out of your day. We have some new faces here today, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. Those of you who are new, we're here to get nerdy, ask questions, so don't be shy. That's what we're all here for. This is not a one-way Instagram live or something. We're here to ask questions and learn about the brand.
Yeah,
That's
when I start boring you, start asking a lot of questions.
perfect. That said, though, we do ask you to keep yourself muted until you are ready to speak, just so we don't get background noise and dogs barking, wives yelling, and sirens going by and whatnot. But other than that, please enjoy, taste responsibly. You are home, so you don't have to worry about drinking and driving. But you have a full 1 ounce pour. You have 7 ounces in front of you, so pace yourself. You are all adults, and we will treat you as such. But in that, have fun, get nerdy, ask questions, and this is a unique opportunity to have the man who started the brand and does all the barrel picks spending some time with us. So now's the time. Dave, please take it away.
Well, thank you guys for spending the time with me. I'm Dave Schmier from Proof and Wood. I guess a quick background for those of you who aren't familiar with Proof and Wood and not familiar with myself. Started Proof and Wood 10 years ago. We're an independent bottler. Our motto is sourcing is not a crime. Um, we don't distill. The name kind of points to the fact what we do control, how we bottle it, what ABV proof that we bottle it, and how long it's in the wood, the age. A couple of things that we control. Before Proof and Wood, um, I spent the previous 5 years as one of the co-founders of Redemption Rye, which we sold to a bigger company. And so I've had a little bit of experience working with American whiskey, particularly some whiskey out of Indiana that you guys might be familiar with. Probably a lot of that is in the bottles we have today, but there's some different items. As far as Proof and Wood goes, we continue to source from what's now known as MGP out of Indiana, but also about 10 other distilleries around the country. For example, we've got rye from California, single malt from Colorado, bourbon and rye, and some single malt from Ohio, of course, Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana, North Carolina, and probably somebody I'm forgetting about. We recently started a long-term partnership with Whiskey House of Kentucky, which, if you're not familiar with, it's a team that built Bardstown Bourbon Company. It's a really cool state-of-the-art facility with a great team of distillers and operators. So I'm real excited about the future for that. Today we've got a kind of neat selection of whiskey. Some of our kind of what I'll call everyday offerings, the representative bourbon, the Tumbling Dice 4-year 100 proof bourbon, to a couple of versions of our presidential dram, which we do every 4 years, and then the perhaps ill-named Blame Canada, which is a 22-year-old Canadian rye whiskey, and then Seasons 2024, which is a blend of American and Canadian whiskey.
Um, can you tell us what order we should put these in, just so we some of us want to pre-pour.
Okay.
Actually, side by side.
We're gonna start with the representative. Then we're gonna go to the Tumbling Dice 100. And let's see. Um, you guys should have two presidential dram rye whiskeys. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. One of them is a 95% mash bill, and the other is the 85% rye mash bill.
We have them labeled by the ABV. So one of them is 58, one of them 61.
Okay.
I don't know if I could tell in the photo which one was the mash bill. Does it say a good point for us to know? Does it say the mash bill on the bottle somewhere?
One's listed as a bourbon, one's listed as a rye.
Well, we have
Is
an
there another
eight-year-old
one?
presidential dram,
Oh yeah, no,
presidential.
you're right. It's yeah, but you typed it in like yellow. You can hardly read
You're
it.
welcome. It's in the color of whiskey, some whiskey.
Okay.
No
Like a
complaint.
light one.
Okay. So to answer your question, yes, it does say it on the actual bottles, in really small print on the back.
On the
But
back.
um, the proof on the 85% is 122.76.
Perfect.
And then the proof on the 95, no, that's the wrong one, should be about 117.5 or
Perfect.
0.48.
And we're gonna do the 61 first, 61 percenter first, and then the 58 percenter, right?
Yeah, we'll do that. And then after that, we will go to the presidential dram bourbon, the 8-year-old.
That's a two-term president.
That's a two-term president, yes.
Okay.
And after that, we'll do Blame Canada and finish with Seasons 2024.
Wonderful. Beautiful bottles on those last two, by the way.
It's what's inside that counts, though.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And we also have these nice boxes. Don't
Yeah.
forget that.
I feel like you went to the bottle store and you were like, I want them all.
Well, um, we can get into bottles a little bit as we start the first pour.
Perfect. And
Um,
just to confirm, so our order is going to be representative, tumbling dice, presidential dram at 61%, presidential dram at 58%, then the two-term presidential bourbon, Blame Canada, and season to 2024, seasons 2020. The last one is seasons to 2024.
right. You want to go back, do that backwards too?
Read it backwards to you?
I'm kidding.
Oh. I
All
swear
right.
to drunk, I'm not God. I'm not there yet.
All right. So I'm going to pour a little bit of this. So
Yeah, so
you are
tell
at,
us about this presidential line because I think that's what really put you guys on the map to begin with. I know one of our members was out hunting for every different color, different wax color and all that stuff. So
I don't know if we're actually on the map yet, but the presidential dram is a story I don't get tired of telling because it's perhaps one of the best parts of this business is the friends and collaborators that we have. Um, I've been working with the same distributor in the DC area for about 15 years. And Mike, the president of the distributorship, is a good friend, and he came to me and he said, "Hey, I've lived in DC area all my life, and one thing I can tell you is no matter who wins the presidential election, the inauguration is always a great party." Starting with that premise, he asked me to find 4-year-old whiskey and 8-year-old whiskey to call it one term and two term, and we bottled it as a presidential dram. First go around was kind of a DC only thing, and then we've now made it something we do every 4 years nationally. So they'll be generally a 4-year old. Well, this time we have 4-year-old rye, 8-year-old bourbon. We've done it the other way before. 2028, who knows what we'll do. But there will always be a presidential dram in the kind of election slash inauguration season.
And then
Uh,
how do we tell the colors apart? Because you have the white, the red, and the blue wax.
okay. Um, with the presidential dram and the senator, we change the colors around a lot. It's always red, white, and blue. So if you've got blue wax, if you can see that, the front label will be predominantly the type will be red. And then if it's a red wax, the type will be blue. So um there isn't necessarily a rhyme or reason to when we make the changes, but that's kind of how it works. We try not to create a partisan kind of feel to it. It's all about great American whiskey, celebrating great American traditions. And then the representative, we always do in white, mainly so they all look cool, red, white, and blue on the shelf.
And it looks like the red and the blue are single barrels, whereas the representative is not.
Um,
Or is that not a rule?
no, yeah, no, that's fungible. Um, the standard representative and the senator. So we started with the presidential dram, and the kind of the collection kind of evolved from there. The first one we did after that was the ambassador, which was a 12-year-old bourbon that we haven't bottled, I think, in 5 years because we don't have stock that old yet. We will soon. And then the Justice, there was two batches of the Justice, a 14 and a 16-year-old whiskey. They were Tennessee bourbons. And then we did the Cabinet in 2022, 2023, which are both blends of bourbon and rye or boo rye. And then, as I like to say, the representative and the senator, like their namesakes, are always for sale. The representative being a 4-year-old bourbon and the senator being a 6-year-old rye. Um, and those two generally are always small batch. And for us, small batch is 20 barrels or so at a time and always barrel proof. The presidential drams happen to always be single barrels, but we do a fair amount of representative and senator single barrels as well. And generally on those, the wax color will be silver and gold respectively instead of the red, white, and blue format. Is that confusing enough?
I think so.
Okay. So let's get into the representative. Um, the representative's claim to fame. 2 years ago at the World Whiskey Awards, it was named the world's best bourbon. Not my words, but they are words, which was kind of cool. Wasn't expected, but what the representative was meant to be, and it wasn't really kind of pun intended, but it was supposed to be kind of representative of a classic, big, bold bourbon whiskey. You know, traditional mash bill, 75% corn, 21% rye, a little bit of barley. Again, this batch, well, batch that I have, which may or may not be the same as the one you have, is 115.94 proof. Cheers. So generally, you're going to get, your classic bourbon flavors, vanilla, caramel, little tobacco notes, things of that nature. It's just a really solid bourbon that you can sip all the time. You can also use it for cocktails, but it's not meant to be out of the ordinary. It's supposed to be just a good example of what bourbon should be. The minimum age is 4 years old. Generally, when we do a blend, depending on kind of how it tastes, we'll probably put in whiskey as old as 7 years, 5, 6, and 7 in there. So it's never going to be always 4 years old, but it's age stated at that.
There's a fight in the chat for who has more proof and wood.
It's, that's good to know. Uh, Andrew, you say they're not sold in your state. What state are you in?
I'm in Ohio.
Ohio. The we don't work well with control states.
Should
We
have a
would love
conversation. I can help with that.
cool. Definitely send me a note.
Yeah.
We would love to sell in Ohio. I know we have a lot of people who smuggle stuff in from Kentucky, so we'd rather sell it directly.
Yeah.
I,
My group brings a lot of brands to Ohio, but
cool.
are all the DC collection barrel proof still?
Yes.
Because they used to say it, and then I had one bottle that didn't say barrel proof anymore, and I wasn't sure.
No, I don't. I can't recall that we ever did one that wasn't barrel proof. We might have forgot to put it on the label, but they're all barrel proof. And just so you know, barrel proof is not a legal term. So there's no one actually checking. But I assure you they're all barrel proof.
Is cast strength a legal term? Is there a legal term that's accepted?
I don't think there is. I mean what we're I think they're marketing terms.
Interesting.
Uh yeah, but you know the things that they do look at, obviously, although they can look at our records at any time, the age statement has to be accurate, and the proof points at the actual proof. Like you can't say, you know, print labels that say 100 proof and fill it higher or lower. They'll actually pull bottles off the shelf randomly and test them. And so far, so good on that front. Any reactions to the representative?
Well, I think it's exactly what you said it was. It's always just like a solid, great bottle of bourbon. I've gone through a couple bottles of it. Um,
Thank you.
I'm one of those guys who hunted everything. I think I have it all. I have 4-year, 8-year president. I have the ambassador. I have the single barrel senator. I have the cabinet. I have the justice. Two of those actually. Your stuff's it's great.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, and the best bourbon in the world was a kind of a funny thing to say. I mean, my normal stance on awards is they're all bullshit, except when I win. But um, you know, it's definitely very subjective. Fortunately, the judges at the World Whiskey Awards like kind of bolder, high proof whiskey that leans towards rye. So we do pretty well there. Um, so this one, the best in the world, and then the next one we're going to do is our Tumlin Dice, 4-year old. The dice tell us how old it is, and 100 proof. This one happens to be my favorite. So we've got the best in the world, and then my favorite, whatever that might mean. Um, And the tumbling dice, as you can see maybe on the label, is a heavy rye mash bill, which in this case is the 60% corn, 36% rye, and a little bit of barley.
I tell
Um,
you, when I first learned that the dice tell how the year, it blew my mind because it was so obvious, yet it was so genius at the same time. Like I just remember just being like, "Oh shit!" So it's a 4 and a 3. So that's a 7-year old. Like it was just like I don't know. I just think it's a rad.
so,
It's rad.
so for me, I thought it was incredibly obvious. And the first time, you know, somebody looked at me funny, like I never realized that. I, of course, said, "Well, what are you, some kind of clown? You can't figure that out." And then after going around a lot, I realized it was a me problem, that it wasn't obvious until I pointed it out.
Well, I was about to say, once you learn about it, it's very obvious. But until then, you're like, I don't know.
You can unsee it, yes, which is great. Um, in fact, and again, I feel fortunate to know that there are people who collect them. And I met people who have, oh yeah, I've got, all the single barrels you did, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever it may be. And they're sitting on a collection of them that and they didn't realize that. Now it says we write it out on the back, but on the front label, up till recently, we did not put the age because we thought, again, it was obvious. We recently bottled an 11-year-old, which was kind of the first one. We decided to make sure that people knew how old it was. So the tumbling dice is part of what, we have two kind of lines that sort of evolved again, not intentionally, but they did.
Do
It's
do the dice numbers change?
so this is our standard bottling. It's 4 years old and 100 proof. We do a lot of single barrels, and we've done from four, well, I guess now from 4 to 11. There's going to be a 12-year-old. I think we have one that we're releasing this
And it's a
year. So
tumbling dice, single barrel, and then the dice are the age.
correct,
Oh, well,
correct.
interesting. That's cool.
Yeah. And so the what I call our American table whiskeys, they'll retail um, about $30 plus or minus. It's the tumbling dice 100 proof, our Deadwood bourbon, and our roulette rye. It's kind of a little gambling theme. And the story there is I like to gamble. I'm not very good at it, so I've got to sell a lot of whiskey. So drink up. Um, and one of the things that I get asked a lot, it's 4 years old and 100 proof. And the question that'll come up is why is it not bottled in bond? And the reason for that is that to be bottled in bond, you've got to be at least 100 proof and 4 years old, but all the whiskey has to come from the same distilling season. So when I bottle, and again, we'll probably do about 20 barrels at a time, try and keeping the range of flavor consistent and quality. Generally, it'll be a blend of 4 to 7 year old whiskey. So once you do that, even though you've got older whiskey, and some might say that, um, if not definitely quality, definitely the cost is higher to do that. But the bottled and bond rules don't account for that. So rather than be bottled and bond, try to make a more quality, consistent product. And what I really like about this is you get, the sweet bourbon backbone with the 60% corn, but then you've got the spice of the rye cutting through it. And depending on where it hits your tongue, you might get the sweet emphasizing the spicy or the spicy emphasizing the sweet. But the flavors that it generates are just fantastic. You get some cherry in there, a little bit of cinnamon, really nice on its own. Um, Mainly meant for cocktails, though.
Now you mentioned that you have different sources. Do you do blending amongst the sources, or is it the different sources go into different bottles, or both?
The future is unwritten. Uh, the
Sure.
the majority of the inventory that is in the age range where we're bottling it is all from Indiana. Um, a lot of the bourbon and rye that I've had produced is the same mash bill, so potentially we'll blend it together in the future, or we'll segregate it by state. Um, I've done more blending, and I think we have one example of that. We're blending American and Canadian whiskey. So all things will be possible. But the key part is trying to be transparent uh, and let people know what they're drinking.
what makes this one your favorite?
I just like the flavor.
I've had the tumble and dice straight rye before. Where does that kind of come into play with versus this?
So the Tumbling Dice Rye, all the Tumbling Dice Rye, I shouldn't say all. So the Tumbling Dice Rye, for the most part, are single barrels. And there's single barrels between mainly between 7 and 9 years old. There's I think 3 barrels that are older. We did two 11-year-old and one 12-year-old coming up. So they're all old. They tend to be older rye single barrels. We also did two batches, a California and a Texas batch, where we blended between 6 and 11 barrels together for Tumbling Dice Rye. So that would be the only ones that are not single barrel. So we have rules and then we break them.
I found
Any,
an 11-year-old while Googling it, so I tossed it in the chat.
what's that?
I said I found an 11-year-old tumbling dice in Chicago, so I tossed it in the chat.
In Chicago, huh? Oh wow. Okay, so that is the original tumbling dice. Um, I just clicked on that. Hopefully it did not ruin the. I did not know any of those were available. So I think that was probably bottled around 2016, 2017. And it's an 11-year-old bourbon, which again was the first tumbling dice we ever bottled. And when we bottled it, a lot of the trade reaction was, "Wow, $100 for an MGP whiskey. That seems like a lot." And then a year later, people would call me demanding more of what we didn't have. Um, so that's kind of the whiskey business. Any additional comments on the Tumbling 100?
Yeah, that one's really, really tasty. I guess since you said it was your favorite too, like how do you kind of think about before you tried it? Did you almost know, were you excited about the process before, like, oh, this might be a favorite, or maybe you tried it first, then you were like, okay, no, this is it.
So this is there's I guess there's three, I guess, classic MGP mash bills. Of course, the 95% rye, and then there's the 75% bourbon that the representative is, and then there's this. It's a 60% corn, 36% rye. And I've just always loved the flavors that come out of this. The other thing too, I think it really shows well young too. We started bottling, I guess around 2019, some 4-year-old as single barrels, and one of those single barrels actually won the best single barrel at the World Whiskey Awards that year as well, which is an award we've won, I think, 3 times in the last 5 years. So there's definitely consistency to the whiskey and what we do with it. So you had mentioned, the great variety of bottles that we seem to have. Um, so the easy explanation is this is for kind of our, American table whiskey every day, $30 a bottle line. And then this we use for, much more higher end, really limited stuff. Where it got a little bit weird during COVID is we used to use this bottle and another similar from a different manufacturer exclusively for the rep and the senator and our single barrel lines. Unfortunately, during COVID, we couldn't get that bottle at all. So we went to this bottle. and which people kind of preferred. But then when we ran out of that first shipment, we couldn't get any more, and we went back to the shorter bottle. And then when we won the best bourbon in the world that year, we wound up on the front cover of Whiskey Magazine and American Whiskey Magazine with that bottle. So we decided to pivot back to it when we were able to. In the future, we're going to have our own mold and our own bottle, and we'll kind of have fewer different looks and make it a little bit more consistent.
Well, so why bottle the representative at 4 years old? I mean, I would think you'd put that in a presidential bottle. You can bottle
Um,
rep at two, theoretically by the name.
so we, again, wanted to bring a certain amount of quality and consistency to it. So we describe it as two congressional terms.
Okay.
And again, same that in that batch, there's going to be whiskey between 4 and 7 years old generally. Any additional comments? Anyone have their own preference for their favorite of those two bourbons?
I think I like the nose on the Tumbling Dice a little bit better, but the palate a little more on the representative. I thought the representative really um it tasted older than 4 to 7 years for sure. But the nose on the Tumbling Dice was very like baking, confectionery, which I like. So good variety.
Yeah, and I think the barrel proof also helps it a lot too. And the other thing that's really interesting, kind of counterintuitive sometimes, is how that generally the barrel proof whiskey will drink it will seem lower proof than it actually is. And part of that, it's a well-made whiskey. It doesn't have a lot of flaws in it, even at a young age. And because we're not adding water, you're getting a ton of flavor, and that's going to coat your mouth, and you're not gonna feel the heat as much when you're tasting it. You get that Kentucky hug on the way down, and then an hour later, when you try and stand up after drinking, you'll know it was high proof. But that's what we got
Yeah,
going on.
no sharp edges on the representative for me. It was good.
Cool. Glad you enjoyed.
I've always thought the Tumbling Dice is just such an underrated product. Like whenever I see a store pick of Tumbling Dice around the country, I'm grabbing it no matter what store I'm in. And now I
Cool.
probably have 15 or 20 bottles that are sitting in my basement because I'm a sucker for Tumbling Dice store picks and I can't drink them quick enough. So the Tumbling Dice outweighs the representative for me. But if I see a senator, I'll always pick a senator up because the senator is just a monster product.
Yeah, to me, and well, we do have the presidential dram is kind of a younger version of the senator, if you will. It's the same rye, so we can talk about that a little bit. Um, I really think that that rye really shines between 6 and 10 years old. I mean, it's great off the still, but between 6 and 10, which is what the senator is going to be, you get a great balance of the flavor of the spirit and the flavors of the wood kind of developing. And sometimes when they get older, the wood overtakes the spirit, and it might become an elegant um, spirit to drink. You're not getting the flavors of the base spirit as much uh, as to when it's in that sweet spot between 6 and 10. Somebody mentioned a Senator 2019 with question marks. Um, we uh, we put the years on the bottles when we bought the years represent when they're bottled. Really, no other reason other than a nod to the future. in that I always find it interesting when I find old bottles and you see when they were bottled and think about the history or maybe 20 years from now people will search out bottles from the years they were born or that kind of thing. Just kind of fun to do.
Actually, that was for the store in Chicago. They have a 2019 bottle of Senator, it looks like. Now,
Yeah,
was
that was probably one of our first batches, if I recall correctly.
yeah, whether that's valid or not, who knows, right? The picture could be old.
That is true. And that's also why I mentioned we did batches for California and Texas, and that was for a big chain well, they bought a lot of single barrels from us. They had trouble managing it store to store on their websites, and they're like, "Oh, it would be easier if you did a batch for us." So we did that. All right, guys, ready for the presidential dram rye?
You
And
mentioned that there's gonna be so I don't know if it was in this layer of six here, but there's something from California, some stuff. If you know which one, can you kind of let us know and where that's coming from when we get to it?
I mentioned California in terms of where we're distilling. We distilled in California 2 years ago with Sonoma Distilling. We did some 95% rye in their pot still. So that we haven't bottled any yet. Really, it's really nice. It's similar, but it's got its own kind of vibe to it. What we're gonna drink tonight, there's two presidential dram ryes that we bottled last year. One is the standard 95.5 rye, and I think we're starting with the other one, which I was able to rescue a couple of barrels of rye whiskey with a mash bill at 85% rye, 15% barley from a small distillery in Minnesota that had shut its doors. So we're going to start with that one. And
Yeah, very grassy on the nose. I agree, Michael.
it's got some grassiness. It's got and these barrels I think were 5 and 6 years old. Again, we age stated it at 4. Um, but they're a little bit older, but they're a little bit thinner than the MGP rye, and some notes of them you'll get some more bourbon notes if you drink it for a little bit. But right now, I'm picking up a lot of the spiciness from the rye that really pops.
Who's the distiller for this one?
Um, Trying to think of the name of them. They are out of business now. Um, it's a little farm distiller.
It wasn't Panther, was it?
What's that?
Was it Panther?
I don't think that was the name of the distillery, but they might have had a line called Panther. It sort of rings a bell. Or they might have sold to people who were bottling under the Panther name, but I'm pretty sure there is a connection.
And you said this is 85% unmalted rye and 15% malted barley.
Correct.
New charred oak, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so to be an American rye, it has to be New Charred Oak. It's the same rules as bourbon. There's a handful of rye that you'll see that will say whiskey distilled from rye, where they might use used cooperage. or I think, and I don't know what they do currently. Um, Old Patero, I believe, used uncharred barrels. They were new barrels, so that it's not technically an American rye whiskey. I think they had a contort what they called it, but we always give a nod to Old Patero, kind of one of the first kind of modern craft distilleries, if you will, that really started bringing back rye when absolutely nobody cared.
This drink's like a Pennsylvania or a Maryland style rye because it's got that little bit lower, almost like that old Overholt, their Monongahela rye. If you've ever had that,
Yeah, and again, for something at this higher proof, it feels really soft to me.
but but it's definitely proofier than that. But it's got that like nice mintiness to it, and the rye comes through in a good way.
Yeah, it was really enjoyable. I was pleasantly surprised when we first opened it up.
Reminds me a little of some of the Dad's Hat uh, barrels I've had. I think it's Pennsylvania, maybe. At least their brand.
Yeah, their dad's had's definitely Pennsylvania, and that style.
This is 2024, you said?
Yeah,
Okay.
those were all bottled in 2024. All right, then we're gonna go on to the other version. I think we did like a total of 50 barrels of the presidential dram rye, and about 10 of them were were the Minnesota rye. And then we also did a another like special small batch for a club out in California. I think we did 5 barrels for them. Obviously, a very big club.
Remember which one it was?
Um,
Was it
there's
was it Eureka?
Yes, it was. So moving on to the 95.5 rye.
I got that bottle. Eureka.
Oh yeah.
Almost done.
What'd you think of it?
Well, I hated it. You could tell. Had it for like 4 months. No, it's fantastic.
Glad you enjoyed it. It was a fun project.
Do you try to channel any other like inspirations of distilleries, brands, or do you try to go kind of your own path for some of these,
Well,
especially like maybe this rye collection?
I mean, I try to bottle what I like, and as far as inspiration goes, I mean, the core stuff we do is just selecting barrels of really good whiskey from a really good distiller. I'm really kind of excited about the future, having um, so much more to work with and figure out, you know, more signature styles that we can do and things like that. But for the most part, if there is any kind of style, it's really just what I like, which is definitely rye heavy and higher proof. Yeah, Middle West does make a great pumpernickel rye. We actually bought a lot of whiskey the last 2 years from Middle West as well, but it's all too young to bottle right now. You can see the contrast between the two different ryes, and I question whether it was wise to confuse people and do two of them, but I thought the Minnesota rye was interesting, and it's kind of fun to branch out a little bit, especially with the presidential dram kind of concept.
How many bottles do you typically shoot for the presidential range or those? Does it vary a lot between them, or
In terms of,
just how many bottles are released, for each one?
well, what I've learned with whiskey in general is we never get it right. Sometimes we bottle too little and sometimes we bottle too much. Um, so we were basing what we bottled on what we did the last time around.
Try to keep it, yeah, somewhat consistent.
Yeah, yeah. Turns out that people were a little burnt out on politics last year for some reason. I don't know.
I thought it was pretty smooth sailing the whole time. Yeah,
But our our big campaign was vote whiskey.
got my
Ne
vote.
Next time everyone will listen. Any comments on the two different ryes?
Yeah, when I went from the 95 back to that third one, that tasted way more of the bourbon notes, going to the less rye version. That was super interesting. But I didn't pick up any bourbon kind of notes the first time around.
Yeah, that is interesting because I haven't tried them side by side in a while, and my first thought when I had the 85% one was I got the rye right away, when in my head I was thinking that there were more notes that lean towards bourbon, but with the contrast to the 95 rye, you definitely picked that up. And Amanda said that she got a lot more mint on the second one, and really that mint menthol note is definitely an MGP signature.
Which just kind of reminds me, I mean, I have way too many bottles, and when like, my kids, friends, parents come over and they're like, I mean, is whiskey really that different? Like, is it worth having all these different kinds? Don't they all kind of taste the same? I'm like, no, no. And it's just interesting that it's like this is such an example where it's like two expressions from the same distillery where the label to most people would be identical, and to have such different flavors, it just is really emblematic of how that is just it's just not the case. There's wild differences within them, and that's why you need to explore and try them. It's fun.
Yeah, that's a good point, and probably moving forward when we do things like this, we might want to make the label a little bit clearer what's going on there, so people who care will know.
Yeah, on top of that, I know some heavy bourbon drinkers that only do bourbon and they think all rye tastes the same. So I think having these two back to back would quickly change their mind.
What's fascinating about rye is how much variety there is right now. It's really funny going back 15 years when I started the previous brand with the 95% rye, which was an anomaly. Um, you know, there were really only a handful of ryes, Rittenhouse and Old Overholt and Turkey and Jim Beam, and most of them were very corn forward. They'd be like 55, 60% rye and the rest corn or something along those lines. And they had definitely a little grittier feel. And when we first started pouring the 95.5, people were like, well, this isn't what rye is supposed to taste like. But I think, and now that 95.5 is kind of taken over as being the default. But what's really cool, whether you're going Dad's Hat, um, some of the Whistle Pig things going on out there, Sagamore, that there's so many different expressions of rye and so many different flavors that you can play with and enjoy that I think it's definitely a disservice for people to think that all rye tastes the same. So in other words, drink more rye.
David, have you had Far North yet?
Yeah, yeah,
I love their stuff. Just unbelievable what they're doing there.
definitely, definitely. And they have control over the grain that they're growing and everything else. It's really cool. All right. Are you guys ready for the bourbon?
Before we, can you talk about your Polish rise for just a second?
Yes,
Um,
thank
Because
you. Thank you.
like the
so
globe is awesome.
the two, well, it's the same rye, but the two bottlings that we did are the Stranger and the Globe. What they're both the rye came from a distillery in Poland, a small distillery that closed down a couple of years after they started. And in Poland, to the best of my knowledge, there's very few whiskey distilleries, very few small distilleries. I'm not sure, what led them to open the distillery they did. Um, but in any event, when they shut it down, they shipped all the whiskey to Kentucky, which is where I found it. And it was 100% rye, and it was originally put in, to best of my knowledge, French oak, and then shipped to Kentucky in bulk, and then rebarreled into used bourbon barrels. And the rye itself kind of has a little bit of funkiness to it. I'm not sure if that had something to do more with the distillation process or the barrel aging that it went through. But it's definitely uh, tastes like rye whiskey, but you'll also get hints of the bourbon from the aging there. And then the second iteration we did, which was our last 10 barrels of that rye, we finished in Jamaican rum barrels. So Polish rye, French oak, Kentucky bourbon barrels, Jamaican rum. We called that the Globe, and that rye really stood up well to the flavors of the rum, and you get a just great array of flavors from that one. Anything
Do you,
specific about the Polish? Four bottles of the Stranger. Good for you, Jason. There's still some floating around, I think.
you know what kind of Jamaican rum it was?
Yeah. It was rum that we had purchased from Worthy Park and probably aged for about 3 years in those barrels.
Nice, yeah. I'm kind of a rum guy, so I love Worthy Park. I know they have a range of, low ester to high ester.
Hmm.
I'm kind of curious if you know what mark it was. That might be a
Yeah.
little,
Um, it would have been the WPL.
yeah, yeah, great stuff. I haven't
So
I haven't tried it, but now I'm very curious.
yeah, so the rum was the lower end of their scale, the light as they call it. It's not really light. Um, and is part of a project that I'd done just kind of on a whim. I bought a whole bunch of Jamaican column distilled rum that I thought, oh, it'd be kind of neat to put it. It was very light to put it into some old rye barrels that we had and see what we got. And it turned out that within 4 weeks, the barrels had completely taken over the flavor of the spirit. So I called up Worthy Park and bought some more intense pot still rum. So eventually we'd be able to blend it, and we blended that as a rum called Exodus.
Oh, really? Interesting. Okay. So Proof and Wood, Exodus.
Yep. It's
Okay.
definitely more of a kind of bourbon drinker's rum. It's got a lot of pronounced whiskey notes to it.
Yeah, that's okay. There's some overlap with certain rums and bourbon. So
Yeah.
interesting bottle too. Is it the tall, skinny?
Yep.
I'm just Googling it randomly, but cool.
Was there sugar added to the end of that one?
No.
I
But
guess I guess I remember it being very sweet.
yeah, you'll get, I mean, there's some sweetness that you'll get in some rums naturally, but not a lot because it is distilled out mostly. But you're gonna get the sweetness from the barrels as well. So those two things will overlap. And we definitely um aged it at a variety of proofs, but definitely some on the lower end of things. So what I find is like normally the whiskey will put in the barrel at 120 proof. When we barrel it at a lower proof, I tend to pick up more sweet notes in there. And definitely less tannins. So that might be where that's coming from.
And this presidential dram, is this a Dickel?
No.
It's an MGP. Oh, look.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay. All right.
Are we talking bourbon or rye?
The bourbon.
Okay. So the presidential dram bourbon is another fairly standard MGP mash bill, um, but not as popular. It is 99% corn, 1% barley, and they tend to, I think they show better at more advanced ages. And
All right,
I
what
didn't
1% barley that it's got a versus zero. Do you think that why not two or 1% kind of seems negligible? Like how do you gotta decide that one out?
So again, being that I'm just merely a guy who sources barrels, I can't speak to that directly. I don't know. One of the things that I've seen with distilling is, definitely one of the reasons that the 95.5 rye is that mash bill is that, it's sometimes hard to work with the grain without enzymes and the barley, the malted barley, will help the fermenting process along. So that's one of the reasons they'll use malted barley. But I do question, is 1% going to make that much of a difference? Um, I will try and get that answer. But so one of the other things I didn't pre-open this bottle of presidential dram. And one of the things, as nice as our wax looks, it's a pain in the ass to open. So you're not disagreeing, are you?
You're not alone either, though.
No, no,
That's very
not
common.
Very well known for that.
And I think the only hate mail I get is about the wax. So on that note, this year's project is to eliminate the wax and still maintain a luxurious looking bottle. So with that said, the presidential dram is age stated at 8 years. Um, some of the barrels we had were as old as 10. Unfortunately, I'm not sure what this one was, but they tend to be in the same range between 8 and 10, really well developed. And even though it has it has no rye in it and just a little bit of barley, because of the longer age, you'll definitely get some notes that appear a little bit spicy.
I'm sorry for making fun of the 1%. This one is absolutely delicious. They knew what they were doing. They know what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the other things, you know, MGP sometimes gets a bad rap for whatever reason. I think it stems from uh, distilleries kind of in the early days of kind of our modern American whiskey boom, that people didn't disclose what they were doing, and it confused a lot of people and upset them in the light of, they thought they were buying something from the small distillery down the block kind of thing. But the history of that distillery is pretty amazing. There's been a distillery on that site since the 1850s. And most famously, Seagram's bought it right after Prohibition. Funny how that happened. Like literally the day that Prohibition ended, they put their name on that distillery. Um, and they've been in Seagram's from, I guess, 1930s to 2000, when Seagram's kind of disbanded. They were distilling a ton of whiskey there, and they were doing all kinds of studies of, what's the right entry point for barrels, and all kinds of different things with different yeast strains and things of that nature. Seagram's also owned Four Roses, so there was a lot of cross pollination there. If you ever notice some of the similarities between Four Roses and MGP bourbons, that's why. Um, so they really do know what they're doing there. Cheers. And I mean, I find this mash bill at this age, it's almost like drinking candy. Yeah, Jason, I saw your comment about the enzyme conversion. I tend to agree, so I'm not quite sure why they didn't go 100% corn, or why they didn't, you go more barley. Any thoughts on the flavor?
Just it's all the things that I want a bourbon to be. Sweet but spicy, not too sweet, not too much oak. It's amazing how much balance you got, even though it's 8 years old.
Yeah, no, it definitely at that age, it's a concern that we'll get over oak barrels, but these are pretty solid. Really liked them.
And the complexity you get from just I mean, essentially all corn is also very impressive.
Hmm.
Do you get them at 8 years old, or do you get them younger and then finish the aging yourselves?
Um, a little bit of both. So in general, um, I'll buy I'll buy aged barrels that are ready to bottle tomorrow. I'll buy aged barrels that, for whatever reason, we plan on keeping. Sometimes it's buying 2-year-old barrels, knowing that we're going to bottle it at 4 or 5. Um, Sometimes it's buying, 5-year-old stuff, planning on doing something like this. And then also, in the past few years, we've been um, kind of creating our own mash bills, and having our partner distilleries make them for us.
David, have you ever considered venturing into any of the American single malts?
Um, so from a standpoint of drinking and enjoying them, yes. From a standpoint of cultivating and selling them, not quite as much, because the market's really just not there yet. And I leave that for now to the people who are most passionate about it. I do have some MGP malt whiskey barrels aging, and about 20 barrels that I commissioned with Golden Moon out of Colorado 2 years ago.
What is the MGP malt whiskey? Is that a homestead malted barley or is that something else?
It's all malted barley.
Okay. So it technically would be a single malt.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the regulations are now that they finally passed it, but yeah, it's an American single malt.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. I might blend it. We might bottle it. We shall see.
Does MGP only have column stills or they have pot stills too?
I've never seen pot stills. I'm pretty sure it's just columns and big columns at that.
Got it. Okay. It'll be interesting to check it out.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, even though they're column stills, they generally will distill to about 135, 140 proof. So there's definitely similarities that you're going to get on a column and a pot still, but the most important thing with the column still is they're just a little bit more efficient and tend to be more consistent too.
So with working with MGP so much and knowing they have such a huge portfolio and log, what's like what do you think like your clearance level is right now? And is there more stuff on your wish list or maybe stuff that's not accessible to you yet?
Um, the the only thing that I wish I had more of is there is a mash bill, 51% rye, 49% malt, that we had a few barrels of. And it's become hard to find because Beyonce's whiskey is using it, and I think they bought most of the supply that was out there.
Dark Arch uses it.
What's that?
Dark Arch uses it.
Yeah, they've got some, and I think they get a lot of their stuff, I thought, from Wilderness Trail as well.
They're starting to transition over, but most of his original stock is all MGB.
That probably makes sense from a timing perspective. I will.
Tough to compete with Beyonce.
I mean, what can she do that I can't do?
Yeah, that's up to you to prove it.
All right, moving on. Any other questions or comments on the bourbon?
Have you ever thought about having them contract distill for you a recipe of your liking, or is that not something that you want to get into with them?
So let's see. So not to get too much into the business aspect of things, but the whiskey marketplace got really funky the last couple of years, and MGP kind of sold out to the venture capitalists and started taking a lot of private equity money and taking up all of their production. So around 22, 23, they stopped selling to me directly. And that's when I started, really exploring other distilleries. And the coolest part was working with the smaller distilleries. But I also, again, I had Middle West distill for me, and now Kentucky Whiskey House. That said, um, I developed, my own mash bill a bunch of years ago. It's a 4 grain mash bill, wheat, uh, corn, uh, barley, and rye. And the original iteration of that mash bill, perhaps a story for another day, but can be found in the Fused Spirits 10th anniversary bottling. The the short version of that is in 2014, 2015, we were also looking at a point where MGP was overselling their capacity, and we were concerned about not being able to buy from MGP. So I started having some of my friends at smaller distilleries starting to distill for me. And one of them was Fuse Spirits out of Illinois. And I did that first test, about 130-gallon barrels of that mash bill. And when we sold Redemption, the new owners of the brand decided they didn't want anything that wasn't distilled at MGP. So few bought it back and wound up bottling it as their 10th anniversary. And no, I got no credit on the bottle. But if you're ever at the Few Distillery, make sure you ask Paul for the Schmier mash bill. So I had Middle West start distilling that mash bill 2 years ago, and Whiskey House last year. So probably we'll bottle that in 2 or 3 years if you can wait.
I'm excited to get into this Canadian rye.
Yeah.
My understanding is this bottle, that this juice is now worth 25% more than it was a month ago.
Ouch. It's priceless at any point in time. Um, so what this is a 22-year-old rye whiskey. The mash bill is 91% rye, 9% corn. And it was distilled at the Lethbridge Distillery in Alberta, which is most famously known as the home of Black Velvet.
I'm sure we have a lot of Black Velvet fans in the room.
Oh yeah, it's um, but aged perhaps obviously in used barrels. So even after 22 years, this is the color that we get. And we bottled this last year, and the Blame Canada name was kind of tongue in cheek. Um, if any of you are South Park fans, there's a veiled reference to that. You know, kind of poking fun at the absurdity of any kind of antagonistic behavior between our two countries. Clearly, I don't own a crystal ball, and now the name is a little bit less fortunate.
It's not your fault, Dave.
It's never my fault.
Maybe you
So
can
this
name the
was
next one. Sorry, Canada.
yeah. Aged or used barrels, but also aged in Canada, right? So a little bit slower would influence.
So wait, you're saying the Canadians are a little bit slower? Um,
Um,
yeah, it spent almost all of its aging up in Canada before we brought it down. But it is bottled in Kentucky, and what do we bottle it at? 118 proof. I think the barrels were originally a little bit higher than that.
Canadian rye and whiskey in general is, I think, generally underrated or just lesser known. So I'm glad you guys did this.
Yeah, I mean, there's some great Canadian rye as their friends at Whistle Pig have proven. And the thing is, there's a lot of um, there's a lot of Canadian whiskey that they call rye that's not really technically rye as we would define it down here, and that's probably given it a bad name. It's definitely a lot lighter, that kind of thing. But this is real rye, and what's really cool about this rye is again at 22 years old, because it's not aged in new charred oak, it really stands the test of time. 22-year-old American rye. I've had a few, some of them are fantastic, but even the ones that are, um, after that long in the barrel, if it's not over oaked, you're still going to get maybe a hint of what the base spirit is in a lot of cases. Here, you can definitely taste that this is rye whiskey, but you also have all kinds of other really cool kind of spices in there. And uh, what do you guys think?
It's really complex. I mean, it looks very light, obviously, but it's anise and some other really complex spices on there. I love it.
Yeah, floral notes, definitely. Sure.
It's black pepper too.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone here has had the Willet 25-year rye. I just happened to be at a tasting at one point like 8 years ago and tried that, and it was like sucking on a stump. There was nothing else besides tannin and wood. So this has a lot more dimension to it, a lot more uh variety than that did.
Yeah, I mean, with American rye and bourbon, anything over, 15 to 20 years old is a little bit of a crapshoot what you're going to get depending on where it was sitting and everything else going on. Um, I've had I've had at a 30-year-old MGP rye that was actually fantastic. I think we got like 7 bottles out of a barrel. And then I had a 36-year-old bourbon that we had that was similar to how you described it, sucking on a piece of wood. And it wasn't a very tasty piece of wood.
This is delicious, and I think the order you put them in, it was just perfect. A really standout, fantastic bourbon, and then followed by a really awesome rye. That the nose was so perfumey and kind of medicinal. I think somebody said anise, which makes sense. I was getting like cough syrup, but I think they're kind of interchange close for me.
Cough syrup makes you feel good, though, right? That's
Yes, yes, there's that definitely, and then on the palate, it's fantastic. It's got that spice and nothing like the other two ryes we tasted.
the smells like bubble gum, but tastes like rye. See that? The one thing I think about good whiskey, we can put it in any order, and there's almost no perfect way to do it. I know people will disagree with me, but um, sometimes it doesn't matter what direction you go as long as you're contrasting things the right way. So is that finished or is there more? I think there's one more.
There's one more. Actually, as we pour our final dram of the night, we're drinking the Seasons 2024. I do want to ask everyone to turn on their cameras for just a second. We have a tradition here. We want to raise a glass and say cheers. So hopefully we can get a few people into this quick shot.
Here's the bottle.
Nice. It's a good looking bottle.
Put your pants on, people. Or actually, no, just your shirts.
Yeah, pants are optional. It's a Zoom call. Uh,
Just get the angle of your camera right if you're
there we
not.
go. That's right. All right, I guess there we go. There we go. Come on, James. Don't be a holdout. Pam, lots of beautiful faces tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Dave, thank you for your time. Cheers, everyone. Smile to the camera. Got it.
My youngest was home sick the other day and I had a court appearance on Zoom. And I walk out of my office and I'm wearing suit top, tie, shirt, basketball shorts, flip flops. And my daughter like died laughing. It was like, "Mommy, come look what Dad's wearing." And she looks up, she's like, "That's what he wears to court now. It's welcome to Zoom life. He's wearing that for 5 years."
Yeah,
Lucky you had
that's
flip
not you.
flops on.
I call it the professional mullet. It was nice.
So I'm looking at the
Just
bottle and realizing that the type is too small for people my age to read now. But um, so the heart of this season's 2024 is some Canadian blended whiskey, which is mainly basically a light corn whiskey that was distilled in 2000 and 2001. Um, so again, very light in character, but a lot of flavor developed over that time, and then blended in some, I believe, 8-year-old rye, some uh, 10-year-old Kentucky corn whiskey, and a little Indiana bourbon in there as well. So the idea was to try and balance some flavors, get some uh, kind of deeper, more intense flavors out of the American whiskey that kind of bounced off of the light Canadian whiskey.
I like this. This is a little sweeter on the front, a little spicier on the back. Has a nice like I don't know curve to it, I guess.
Yeah, and that these blends are really fun to do. It's a little bit different than what I do more on a daily basis.
I was afraid that my palate would be a little burnt out after the Blame Canada, but this is still really really nice and smooth and nice follow up.
Yeah, and the idea is to keep it a little bit light, but still bring a ton of flavor.
And David, what year is the Good Day? When did you release that?
Um, the Good Day, which is essentially the component of light whiskey in the seasons 2024. I think we did that 2 years ago, maybe 2 and 3 years ago, because we did a bottling that was 21 years old and one that was 22 years old.
Do you have a bottle of this one to show us, or I don't know if it's different than the others? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's a bottle, and it comes in this fancy box.
I bet that was easy to plan, right? The box and the dimensions and the closure and the label.
Um, it's uh, it's part of our international procurement process that has gotten that much more difficult lately.
Oh, Jane, it's printed on the inside too. Very nice. Maybe it's a recency bias, but like this is my favorite of the night. I don't know, or one of the favorites. It's really good, really nice.
I think it will always stand out in a tasting like this just because it's so different.
I'm also seeing in that same shape bottle, the Vertigo. What can you tell us a little bit about that one? It's available at some local shops.
If you can find a Vertigo, definitely buy it. The Vertigo is probably my favorite to blend. Um, that one That's all MGP whiskey in the Vertigo. And it started with the first in the season series was called 100 Seasons. And that was a 25-year-old American light whiskey. And so the American light whiskey is similar in style to the Canadian blended corn whiskey. It's, I think, 100% or 99% corn. Um, and light whiskey, if you don't know, was a category created by people in a boardroom, I think in the 60s and 70s, when when vodka, rum, gin really started knocking off the preeminence of whiskey. And so the people running the whiskey world said we need to do something to compete. So they created American light whiskey, which other than a terrible name, the idea was they would distill it to a really high proof. So you're getting less of the grain flavor, much lighter, on its way to being a grain neutral or vodka. And then they aged it and used cooperage. Um, and not shockingly, it didn't really sell that well. Fortunately, because of that, there was some old stock lying around. And again, similar to the Canadian whiskey, because you're using used cooperage, it will stand the test of time better in terms of not being over oaked and that kind of thing. So the what was the 25-year-old light, 100 seasons, um, was really interesting. Had some nice flavors, but it was kind of one note, and you could tell it was old. Um, it had some different spices, definitely, than you found in a bourbon, but it was kind of boring to me. So that was kind of my first foray into, well, how do we take what's good about this and make it better? And I blended in some 9 and 10-year-old rye, some 12-year-old light whiskey to kind of round it out, and then some 6 and 7-year-old bourbon to give it some body, and that became Vertigo. And what I got in there was kind of like this swirl of flavors that you would get some of the notes from the bourbon, some of the rye, and it just kind of spin around in your mouth. And that's where the name Vertigo came from. And it was probably the one um, battle that I got that I won it with the TTB because they wouldn't allow us to call it Vertigo because it's a medical term. So we had to lobby them and get them to approve it.
The seasons, I have a seasons 2021. Did you do one for every year?
Did we? Um, we did a 2021, definitely a 2023. I'm not sure if we did a 2022. I will say because of the packaging and logistics, like we didn't release the 20, actually we haven't really released the 2024, but we didn't bottle it till the end of 2024.
And the Vertigo you said was a one-time release.
We did two versions. There was the first one and then Vertigo 2021, which was the same basic recipe.
I think everyone has voted for their favorite. If they haven't, there's still 10 seconds left. Dave, you think you can guess the group's favorite of the night?
I can. I was reading Jason's commentary on light whiskey.
Holy crap, that's a long ass message. Jason, just unmute yourself and tell us.
Well, it's really nerdy, so I didn't know who would care. But it
We
was great.
all care.
Originally, like Dave was saying, is originally the industry said, "Hey, we want to just kill the distilling limits on bourbon and rye and wheat. So we want to still call it bourbon, but we want to distill it up to 185." And the government was like, no, you can't call that bourbon. So they compromised and they came up with light whiskey, but they only came up with one category because they were like, well, at that point, you can't tell what grain it is. And you can't put it in new oak because if you put it in new oak, it'll just taste like new oak. And it might trick people into thinking it's bourbon or rye because they taste the new oak. So they come up with light whiskey. And I said, it's telling that this is the t same time frame that they invented light cigarettes and light beer and light everything else. And so we have a light whiskey to go with it.
I've heard people compare light American whiskey to single grain Scotch.
Yeah, it's grain whiskey.
Yeah, it's grain whiskey that
We
gets
just
good
do it
after
really
30
lousy
years.
because we don't age it for like 30 years.
Well, you do when you find old light whiskey that's been sitting there for 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to see that as a trend. Um, it's just not worth it. But like everything else in the whiskey world, there's a lot of happy accidents. They didn't sell it like they thought it would, so there's all this stock lying around.
How very Bob Ross of you.
Hey, Bob Ross, is that because of the hair?
Happy accidents.
No,
Ah,
okay, that's your next bottling is if you get some really old light whiskey, you have to do a Bob Ross theme. And just
With
it's a
you
happy
painting
little
on it.
accident. His family's like super against his paintings being sold out to the public, so they're really, really hard to get. I tried to get one a couple years ago. Even though he has like thousands, they're like not out.
really?
Yeah.
In- Happy little used barrels. Got it.
I definitely drank at his gravesite when I was a kid, though. I had friends that went to school in Muncie, and it's like a mecca to go hang out with Bob Ross. So it's a thing.
That's
I've
right.
got I've got a new life goal.
Awesome. All right. What do you think was the group's favorite for tonight?
The group's favorite. Because it was the last one, it maybe seasons 2024.
That's a good guess. All right. I'm gonna polls have been closed, and the answer is it's the two-term bourbon. Was wow by majority winner. Blaine Canada took second, and Seasons, what is it, tied for third with the representative. That's kind of cool.
Cool. Well, I mean, if you guys really like the two-term bourbon, I think we might have a couple of single barrels left if anyone wants their own.
That was my favorite expression of the night. But yeah, I thought that was really, really good. What's we can talk numbers afterwards. That's I thought that was really good. Awesome. Any other questions while we have Dave here? Come on,
I just
guys.
gotta
Keep
say,
talking.
I mean, there were no like obvious worst ones, you know what I mean? Like it was a very consistent, very solid lineup overall, which is hard to do, and you don't see it that often with seven different, barrels from a bottler. So well done on that.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed.
Going back to the Blame Canada from the season 2024 was fun. That brought out a lot more.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so very much. Thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. We hope to see you on a future tasting. Dave, thank you so much for spending the evening with us. Always a pleasure to have you. Every time you feature different fun expressions. Last time we tasted Polish rye. This time we're tasting Canadian. I mean, what else? Are you looking for other countries that, or maybe a Danish rye? Maybe something from a country we haven't tried yet? Anything else coming from the world?
Um, I just gave her it's my email if you guys ever have any questions or anything. Um, I don't think currently we have anything uh that unusual on the horizon, but you never know. Sometimes my madness is premeditated, and sometimes it's simply an opportunity comes up to buy something really interesting, and we'll do that. Like I said before, I'm kind of real excited about having kind of a big um, library of whiskeys from different distilleries to see what I can do with them in the future.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you're on the East Coast, so we'll wrap it up. Anytime you want to
Yeah,
come back and talk some more.
cool.
Um,
I'm actually, where am I? I'm in New Orleans. So
is that not East Coast time? I don't know where New Orleans is.
they are or Central.
Central. Okay, so it's evening. Hit the bars.
I'm on my way.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Thanks everyone. Have a great night.
All right.
Yeah, thanks,
Thanks,
Dave.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank
it was
you.
awesome. Appreciate it.